I'm back again. Hello. Just in time for another video right before Halloween, right on Halloween. If it all goes well with this video, I should hopefully put this out on Halloween. And if not, then oops, I took too long putting things off. So last year I put out a video that was my first What the Heck Are They Singing video. And I did it on a spooky themed song, which was the Aragonaise. So I figured I'd do a follow-up this year and do another kind of spooky-ish song, but kind of breaking away in the tradition of what most of my What the Heck Are They Singing videos are, or have been up until this point. And instead of doing a single like solo aria type song, I figured I'd do a major choral work that also kind of fits the spooky feeling that is the end of October that we're currently at right now. Or November if you're watching this probably anytime after I put it up on Halloween, or if I'm just lazy, you know. So for this edition of What the Heck Are They Singing, I decided I would do the major choral, well, no, hold on, the piece from the major choral work, Carmina Burana, O Fortuna. Yeah, you don't need me to describe it. You can read. You can read the description, the title there below. I put it somewhere in there. But yeah, I wanted to do O Fortuna. It's a really well-known piece of classical music, and it's, what do I want to say about this? So it's a really well-known piece from a major choral work, but it's also one that I've seen memed around a little bit for many years as to what people pretend like they think it's saying. And I always get a kick out of those kind of videos where they just make up what it sounds like they're saying. But I wanted to actually kind of take a moment to dive into the actual lyrics to figure out what the heck are they singing? Yeah, wow. Original content, guys. So, without further ado, let's dive into the background of this piece. So, a lot of the songs and pieces that I've picked and done with this series usually have come from some kind of operatic background. Obviously, not all of them. My first one was just a standalone aria, as well as the Brahms one that I did was also kind of its own standalone aria. But Carmina Burana, the piece that O Fortuna comes from, is really unique in a lot of different kinds of ways.
Okay, pause. I realized in editing this, I completely forgot to say exactly what Carmina Burana is. I mentioned that the other pieces that I've had usually come from operas, but Carmina Burana is not an opera, it is a cantata, which basically means that it's mostly like a major choral work, basically, without really any kind of staging. However, I'll mention an exception in just a second. Basically, it's a cantata, which means it's a major choral work made for choir, and then obviously it was written with instrumental accompaniment. Usually this can be like several, like sort of like an orchestra, not necessarily a full-blown orchestra, but it can also be with piano too. You can go both ways. So it's not really supposed to have any kind of staging. However, I will say there is an exception, because originally Carl Orff did intend it to be performed with some dancers. However, most performances don't usually include the dancers. I was part of one that actually we did have dancers, and that was kind of fun, but it's not meant to be like a full staged thing like you would think of when you think of like an opera. Yeah, so that's my interruption here because I'm a bit of a dum-dum.
So first up, you should know, yes, O Fortuna itself is in Latin, but unlike a lot of choral works that are in Latin, and especially a lot of major choral works that are in Latin, it is not religious at all. I mean, maybe you could consider it to be pagan if you wanted to assign a religion to it, but it's definitely not Christian, which is what we normally think of when we hear, you know, classical pieces, especially major work, classical pieces, and the lyrics are in Latin. This is not the case for this particular piece, however, and that is because Carmina Burana was written by Carl Orff in 1934, I think. I will correct myself if that's the wrong year, but 1934, basically mid-20th century. So this is a 20th century piece. And the text that Carl Orff chose to use for this piece comes from a series of medieval poems. So the lyrics throughout the whole entirety of Carmina Burana are a mixture of Latin, Old German, and Old French. So the text of Carmina Burana is not modern versions of the languages, it's all the medieval versions of the languages because it was taken from medieval poetry. And the text itself of the poems is all about fate and fortune and a little bit of debauchery. So yeah, not typically values that we often think of and associate with the medieval era. It's quite the opposite, in fact. Usually when we think medieval era, we tend to think of the church and Christianity, and this set of poems is the opposite of those good Christian values that we tend to assign to what we thought people lived like in the medieval era. There were things outside of the church, believe it or not. So Carl Orff takes this large series of poems, also titled Carmina Burana, and chose 24 of them to use for his choral work here. And the most infamous among them, obviously, is O Fortuna, which is both the beginning and ending piece to the entire choral work. So that's the lyrics we're going to look at today. So two quick things to kind of address before I go into all of the lyrics. So number one, my pronunciation of Latin may be different than what you're familiar with if you have not sung Latin before. Typically the way choirs are taught to sing Latin is different than the way that people who speak Latin, for instance, are taught to speak Latin. So if my pronunciation sounds different than what you're used to, there's a specific reason for that. However, the way I will speak it will sound very similar to what you will hear in recordings of this, because like I said, the way I was taught to sing it and pronounce it is the way that it's most commonly done, not only just for this particular song, but for most Latin pieces in general. And then number two, obviously, I try to do my best with getting a good translation of all of this, but you know, poetic medieval Latin is its own kind of beast compared to most other the languages that I would try to translate instead. So if you don't like the way I've translated this thing, feel free to leave a comment down below. I'm open to criticisms and critiques, and I will take your angry comments. But anyways, let's actually get into it. So we start off with the infamous line, the title of the piece, O Fortuna, which is O Fortune. So that's the name of this song, is O Fortune. So the first three lines, O Fortuna, velut luna, statu variabilis, which means, O Fortune, like the moon, always changing. And that's going to be our running theme throughout this whole entire big song, is that we're kind of complaining about fortune. This song in particular, O Fortuna, is not a very happy one because, you know, the idea of fortune, if you're going to rely on fortune, if you think that's the thing that's the driving force of nature, you know, how often is luck a very reliable thing in life? Not very often, right? And that's going to be our running theme throughout this particular piece. So the next part goes semper crescis, aute crescis, vita detestabilis, which means ever waxing and waning, hateful life. So this is not a very happy song. Sorry to burst your, I don't think anybody actually ever thought this was a super happy sounding song, but it's really depressing. So yeah, so we're talking about fortune and how it always changes, like the previous line said, ever waxing and waning. So, you know, waxing and waning means coming and going, sort of like, you know, when we're talking like a moon. So like a moon can wax and wane, it can come and go. We go from new moon to full moon, back to new moon. So that's waxing and waning, coming and going. Hateful life. Yeah, real cheerful piece here, huh? So the next part is Nunc obdurat et tunc curat ludo mentis aciem. So now it is hard, and then it soothes as fancy takes it. Pretty self-explanatory there. Ege statem potestatem dissolvit ut glaciam. So poverty, power, dissolve like ice. So the whole idea here is that fortune is a super fickle thing. It's not gonna stick around. It's coming and going, it's hard, and then it soothes. It, as fancy takes it, both poverty and power can dissolve like ice in fortune, with fortune. So then the next section is sors immanis et in annis rota tu volubilis. Fate, monstrous and empty, you whirling wheel. So this is a really good imagery, especially if you've seen the image or like the cover image that usually goes along with Carmina Burana in general, which is this giant sort of wheel of fate. So that's a really good iconography. So I'll pull it up and put it on the screen so you can kind of get what I'm talking about. The wheel of fortune, the wheel of fate that's always constantly turning, because like this piece is saying, fate and fortune are pretty fickle things. Status malus vana salus semper dissolubilis. Bad status, vain prosperity always dissolves. That was roughly what I got for this section. So basically, you know, status and prosperity, they're not things that stick around with fortune. You know, you can have status, you can have prosperity, but it can also be bad. It can be good, it can be bad. It can be with you, or it can be all in vain. It's something that can always constantly be dissolving as the wheel of fortune turns. So the next section is obumbrata et velata mihi quoque niteris. Overshadowed and veiled, you plague me too. Referring again to fortune. Nunc per ludum dorsum nudum ferro tui sceleris. Now through the game I bear my back to your curse. So obviously the speaker is directly talking like to fortune here in this section. So saying fortune is kind of like a game. You know, that makes sense. The wheel of fortune, it's kind of like a game of luck. You know, there is an actual wheel of fortune that is a game of luck. That's a TV show here, at least here in America. And so it's this idea that, you know, fortune is, you're constantly playing this game with fortune. And so the speaker says, I bear my back. So like bearing your back as in kind of opening your back. Like when you bear something, B-A-R-E. So like opening yourself to something, I bear my back to your curse. So the speaker is saying, I open myself to the curse of fortune because I choose to play in the game. Or maybe not choosing to play in the game. It's not really saying one way or another whether or not the speaker is willingly participating in the game of fortune, or if it's saying that it's something we all unfortunately have to take a part in. I guess depending on how nihilistic you want to interpret this poem. And then, of course, the last section is Sor salutis et virtutis mihi nun contraria. So the fate of prosperity and virtue now opposes me. So I guess the speaker is not in a really good point right now with fortune and fate, I guess. Est affectus et defectus semper in angaria. So feeling and failure to which we are always enslaved. That's sort of roughly what it says here. Latin can work weirdly, especially poetic medieval Latin, you know. So it's saying feeling or like affection or, you know, goodwill, and also failure are we are things that we're always enslaved to. It's like we're always enslaved to failure, or we're always enslaved to goodwill, or good feelings or good affections, you know. Those are two polar opposite things which we as human beings always seem to be enslaved to, is what the speaker is saying here. So then, ac in ora sine mora corde pulsum tangite. So in this hour, without delay, pull at the heartstrings, or I also saw pluck at the heartstrings, the same idea. Quod per sortem sternit fortem, mecum omnes plangite. Since fate strikes down the strong, everyone weep with me. Yay! Yeah, this guy's having a great old time, isn't he? So that's the general gist of this piece. As you can kind of see, it's a pretty depressing piece. I mean, I don't think anybody felt that it was a super happy piece to begin with, just from the general way that Carl Orff composed the music. It was he made it fit. He knew what it was saying. Yeah, it's really sad and depressing. And of course, we start Carmina Burana and end Carmina Burana with this idea of the turning wheel of fortune, which makes sense from the perspective that these poems seem to be written to. Like I said, everything else in the whole work of Carmina Burana also kind of fits in with this theme of fate and fortune. Some of the songs are much happier and they are much more lighthearted when, you know, fortune's with you. But obviously in the beginning and end, we come back to this main core theme of life sucks sometimes. This author of this poem seems to be having a heck of a time, doesn't he? I guess the moral of the story is, I don't even know what the moral of the story would this be. Life sucks and then you die. That's what it seems to be for this author. Yeah, that's all I had for this one. So now if you were ever curious as to what O Fortuna is saying, now you know how depressing it really truly is. You know, it kind of makes you think of every time you see this, like I see this song used a lot in like commercials. This is one that's really used a lot by like mainstream companies for things when they want a classical sounding piece. So next time now, if you see it in a commercial or you see it used some way as like a generic dramatic classical music piece, now you know something that the editors probably did not, which is that this is a very depressing song. It really puts into perspective how little people actually understand this piece in particular. So yeah, that's about all I had for today. So of course, if you like this video and you'd like to see more of it, feel free to subscribe to the channel. I've been uploading less the past several weeks, I know this, but I want to get back into the swing of it again to hopefully be more closer to every single week. So stay tuned for that. I got a couple good video ideas that I would like to research and make videos on. So hopefully that'll be coming out soon-ish. But yeah, so subscribe to the channel if you're interested in that, so you can stay tuned for things of that nature. But otherwise, I will see you next time. Goodbye.